Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to Indie Game Business. My name is Indy, and the gentleman right next to me is Mr. J. Powell from Powell Group Consulting. And today, our special guest is Trevor Dudeck. Did I say that right? Dudeck?
Dudeck, you got it.
Dudeck, and he is one of the founders of Lemonade, and he joins us today to discuss why it's important for developers to establish a brand early on, and how they can grow it, and a bunch of other things that I'm sure we'll come up with as we get going into the podcast.
Lunch, hopefully. We just talk about lunch. That'd be great.
Yeah. So what are you going to have for lunch?
I don't know. So if you guys can help me figure it out.
Hot dogs.
I haven't had lunch yet, so I can't help you there. So.
This has been great, guys.
All right. Good show. So, Trevor, welcome, and I appreciate it. But Trevor and I are doing a little bit of a one-on-one here. I was on his podcast Wednesday night, which, as I'm told, has production value, so it's not immediately available, as opposed to Dan and I's project here, which is going to go straight to the podcast the minute we're done with it.
What do you mean? This is all scripted, so yeah.
Yes, it is.
I got my script in the mail yesterday, so
yeah, like hour-long production meetings before we do all of these shows. Yeah. So, Trevor, tell us a little bit. We always like to start. How did you get into the game industry, and walk us through your career up to this point?
And do you have game? That's an important thing too.
Yeah, I mean, my wife would tell you probably no, I don't have game, but somehow I would think maybe some, because I have a wife. But yeah, that's a whole other thing. But you got to ask yourself that regularly, right? But I would say that my background is kind of mixed between content production and sales and digital marketing. So I started just knowing that like a big part of what I wanted to do was make content and tell stories. And I got the opportunity to work for my cousin's production company when I was really young. And I tried to edit, I tried to shoot, and I say tried because I was really horrible at all of those things, and quickly realized that I could be a producer, and that was a role. And working with clients and being a liaison between client and the creative team was something I could do, and I could also help with like actually bringing those projects in, as well as helping put them together. And so content and production has been a big part of my life, and sales has as well. I've also sold things I didn't believe in, and things I wasn't passionate about, like newspaper and steaks door to door. But it's all part of the grind and a part of figuring out what you're good at and kind of honing your craft. And for me, it's all kind of come full circle now to owning an agency with a really good friend of mine who I worked with at a production company here in San Francisco that we were running for about 6 years. We didn't own it, we were running it, and really enjoyed working together as like producer, director, EP, that kind of thing. But we were trying to turn it into more of an agency, because we saw the need for not just delivering great content, but for brands and clients, whether it be a gaming client or a product of some kind, to really understand how they were going to distribute their content and how they were going to build audience. And it wasn't our company, so we couldn't really turn it into what we wanted. So we started Lemonade about 2 years ago to really solve that kind of holistic, full service approach. And really we focus in 4 key areas. Gaming is one of our main industry targets and industry categories, and it's really the biggest for us. And it goes hand in hand with some of our other areas like entertainment, etc. So it's probably my favorite area to work in, and it's tangentially related as far as like us not being a game producer per se, but really our job is to take someone, for example, who has a game maybe here or in another country, and figure out how are they going to build audience, how are they going to market their game or their next launch, how are they going to tell the community about something, how are they going to brag about what's going on. Sky's the limit, right? So that's what we do now.
So, I mean, there's so much stuff that we can get into around brands, and everyone, we constantly hammer into folks, you got to start marketing your game. You got to start building that community. You got to start, getting that ecosystem built around your title. But, let's talk a little bit about from the company level. I mean, for years, and quite frankly, I think it's eroding a little bit at this point in time, but, we've had wonderful brand associations with companies in the industry. And a lot of publishers like to still say that, oh yeah, players play, games based on that we put out because they love our brand. Blizzard is the one that always comes to mind. If you say this game's coming from Blizzard or Blizzard's got a game,
Right.
from a brand standpoint, everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. And they have this warm fuzzy around them, or they used to. That warm fuzzy is degrading a little bit. But why should developers start focusing on, the brand of their company as well as whatever game that there is going on?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's a big question, but it can kind of solve a lot of problems. I think brand is so important, and I think like as soon as you understand brand and like what a brand is, and really, as you and I have talked about, like if you're a developer, like find those resources to really learn about branding, it can actually solve a lot of the problems that you're going to run into, because it can transcend audiences and challenges, and it can really take you from point A to point B, because there's this idea that the company owns the brand, but that's not really true. The player, the customer owns the brand. It gets put out by the company or the developer in this case, but the person who really owns it and really creates a world around it is the community, the players, and so understanding what you're doing with your brand, the story you want to tell, the world you want to bring people into, allows you to build something much bigger than just here's this one game, here's this thing, because everybody wants to create the next thing after that at some point, right? And you can't do that unless you've built a successful brand that people want to anticipate what's coming next from.
So explain a little more, so if we're building a brand on something, we'll use IGB for an example. Why do you say that the customers own that? Wouldn't we own it? I mean, we're the ones making it, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it's a really fascinating conversation, because like technically on paper, like, yeah, you own the brand, but really it maybe a better way to think about it is it lives within the community, within the players, within the customer. So there's this great story. Someone I was talking to recently was telling, and this happened a while back, but it was, there were these guys who were like super fans of Coca-Cola, and they had developed, they had developed a whole kind of world around Coke, and some merch and messaging, and like a fan site, and Coke could have basically shut these guys down and hit them with lawsuits and done all the things that many brands do, but they didn't. They flew these super fans out to Atlanta. They gave them the red carpet tour, because they realized the value of supporting your fans and supporting people who really love and admire and have actually like taken your brand and made it a part of their life. I mean, people get tattoos of artists and brands and things that mean something to them, like that. These are things that live with people forever. And so that's what I mean by saying that, like, yes, you put it out into the world, but it's ultimately going to become something different, like I'm not a dad, but like putting a kid out into the world, you hope for the best, but like it's going to become something, and you have to foster that, right? You have to support that and just sort of guide it, and do your best.
See, here's the bad thing. It's like I've played so much Fallout at this point in time that it's hard for me to separate Coca-Cola from Nuka-Cola. And so it's when you telling me they flew these super fans out, I'm like, did they have to run the gauntlet? How did they do? So what sort of things should you be looking at? It's like, okay, we know we need to build a brand. We know we need to put some stuff out there. How do we do it? What's the first step, second step? I mean, how do we go about, getting started on all of this to get it rolling?
Yeah. So are you thinking like is it in the shoes of someone who hasn't put anything out yet, like brand new?
From scratch.
Right. So
You've done nothing.
Yeah. In that case, I think you're usually still building around something, right? Like your first title, right? So you're thinking, okay, let's say it's a FPS, or it's first person shooter. It's going to be an action game. So what you know the type of audience that you're going to be going after. The kind of world you're going to be creating. You want to think about how the brand itself can evoke that, right? So you wouldn't have a sort of fluffy, cool, delicate brand. You want something kind of edgy and cool and modern, or maybe something throwback. But you still need something that sort of matches the action genre that you're going into. But you also need to think about like, how can that brand itself be something that people associate with that genre, because you're going to be trying to get people to play your game who already play something else, right? So one of the ways you can do that is by building a stronger brand than the next person. We see that all the time. We see like bigger companies doing worse than someone who's smaller, who's just built a better brand, done better marketing, built a better community. So I think you really want to start by understanding who your audience is, and what environment you're going to be bringing them into, and how everything you do, every little decision you make, whether it's the logo, whether it's the messaging you use, or how you talk to people on your social media channels, how you hype up your release, whatever it may be, comes from that kind of tone of voice and that style of the world and the genre and the theme that you want to create, right? Because really we want to think about how they can go escape into your world versus the next person's, right?
So how important is that logo? And I know that sounds like a stupid question, but it's when you're building this sort of stuff, I mean, if you are constantly iterating and changing your logo, what makes a good logo? How much is this something that you can do like I did with a Powell group and drop a P and a G in a circle in MS Paint, and that's what we've been using for 10 years? Or is this something where I need to go somewhere like, what is it, 99 Creative or something, where you can
Fiverr or something?
yeah. What are those? Or is this like, do I need to like go out and hire an agency to tell me how to stylize the IGB in the logo?
I mean, I'll tell you, like, we started our agency a couple of years ago, and like, it's only right now, a couple of years ago, that we're taking some time to like really do like a refresh and redesign. But as an agency, like, my partner and I kind of had some ideas about what we wanted, but we went to a site where you pay $250 and it's a competition, and literally we got, I think, 300 submissions, and some of them are like people who submit to everything. So it's like they just change the font and they submit the same thing they sent to someone else, and that's fine. But like, there is some gold in there, and then whoever you choose can still make some changes based on what you want to do once you choose them. And that worked for us, because we still knew like who is our customer, what are we doing? We're an agency. Like, okay, so if you're a game, if you know your genre, if you know certain colors you like or don't like just you're going to have some decisions made, right? But there's cheap ways to get things done, and then know that you can come back to it. I mean, here in Silicon Valley where I'm at, like every single startup who, and we've worked with them too, they end up like coming to us after they go through the like, we're ready to grow up stage, where they're like, hey, we've hit our next round of funding, and now we're ready to like get a real website and get a real logo. And like, that's just part of it, so you got to know that it's okay that things can change and things can get updated. But you should still try to be rooted in what you originally wanted to create and in your kind of core values, right? As long as you stay true to that, I think people will respect it, and that's where you see, I think, backlash is where brands try to turn into something they're not, to down the road, whether that be for executive leadership direction reasons that don't make any sense, or some other person told them that it would be good to target some new audience that doesn't make any sense. I mean, who knows, right? But you got to know as a player, as a developer, you got to know what's going to make sense and just kind of stick to that, I think.
So that site is exactly the one I was talking about, where I don't remember what the name of it is.
When I first started doing graphics and stuff, I signed up on there and
99 Designs and Design Crowd.
99 Design, I kept wanting to say 99 Bananas, but that's that horrible liquor.
That's a thing.
Yes. It's a oh God, what was it? It's like some kind of banana flavored vodka or something.
Sounds horrible.
It's gross.
It's a bad idea.
But that's like the first thing. Anything is like 99. I'm like, oh yeah, like 99 bananas.
Jay-Z.
So we've got our studio and we've gone and we've got a logo picked and we're getting the website up there. What do we do? What are the biggest mistakes that you typically see a young company make with their branding in general?
Sure. Yeah, I think so it's one thing to like create the logo and have some color schemes and have a website. It's another thing to decide like, how are we going to speak to people on social media versus how we speak to people on our website. And they're not necessarily the same, and they're not necessarily the same on every channel. And they're not necessarily the same for every campaign that you might run to promote something, whether it's something you're posting free on social media, or whether it's a paid marketing campaign because you have some budget for that. But it should all still come back to a blueprint. And a lot of times we end up helping companies, even big brands, who kind of think they have that stuff figured out. But what we realize is, we'll get asked to take over their social media, and they'll hand us something that they kind of think solves all of those problems. But it says, who's our target? It's like, oh, it's millennials. And it's like, well, your target audience is like 7 to 10 versions of that person. And each of those people has different things that interest them, different things that don't interest them, different visuals that they're interested in, different sort of sub-genre and subculture things that are going to pull them in. So like recently we were talking to a brand, kind of like a Second Life sort of a situation, where it was like, how do we pull people into that? And it was like, well, we want to think about people who are into EDM. We want to think about subgenres. We want to think about subculture. We want to think about other scenarios outside of just the age demographic and the geography that they're giving us, because we need to make sure that not only does the marketing hit people who are qualified to fit their community, but also people who are going to stay for a while and create content and be part of the community and be active, right? And that's what you need with pretty much any game, right? Is you need people to stick and be around for a while. So I think there's this fundamental thing of like, okay, you got the branding done, but the messaging and the positioning and how that breaks out to every channel, which is something we often help with, is also something you can take a shot at yourself if you don't have an agency partner yet. But it's important to do, and it's important to know how you're going to do those things.
All right, so let's look at two different scenarios here, because I mean, a lot of the developers that we work with at the Powell Group, they need one of two things. They either need to find a publisher for their game, or they need to bring in more contract work and gigs like that. So even when you're going and you're trying to find a publisher for your game, you also need to be talking to the consumers in your messaging and all that sort of stuff. What channels are important on a B2C basis? What are the best consumer-based channels for developers to focus on? And then which ones perform better on a business-to-business route?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it changes a little based on who you're trying to reach on the consumer level. So I would say, if you're like Gen Z, then like you have to be thinking about TikTok, you have to be thinking about Instagram for sure. But if you're like, millennial or mid-millennial and up, then
wait, time out, Trevor. I don't know how old these people are. So let's do that. Let's start.
Sure.
You define the, ages. So how old are millennials these days?
So millennial, and so like I always say, like, here, I'll look up how they define mid-millennial, but so anything from the 90s to the 2000s is going to be Gen Z. Okay. That's obviously like what anybody's focused on right now, it seems like. And then for millennials, we're going to be looking at anything from birth years 81 to 96. And then for anything baby boomers, anything like below that, it's just going to be it's going to be 81 and below. I mean, you could break this down a lot further, but just try to keep it like really, really simple. It is just to think about, okay, if it's teenagers, then TikTok. If it's over 20 to like 30, then Instagram and Facebook. If it's above that, still Facebook is in there, because I mean my grandmother's on Facebook more than I am. But then you might consider like also just how much email marketing should you be doing and that kind of stuff as well, right? But I would say like it's more about the how those specific audiences break down. So you wouldn't necessarily just go on a platform like TikTok because you're reaching a young audience. You'd go there if you were reaching a young audience who you could develop good content for. If you're not ready for it, if you're going to do a bad job, like don't do it just because it's the thing. I just want to make that clear, right? Like, because that's where I think a lot of people get that pressure of like, oh, we got to be on TikTok or we got to be here, right? You got to also have a plan, and you got to make sure you can develop some content regularly for any channel that you're going to go after. I for example, focus on LinkedIn. All the other channels are kind of just in the background for me, because I don't socialize in a meaningful way. Even on Instagram, even though like the work we do is visual, there's not a lot of like meaningful messaging and interaction happening about the projects that we do from a B2B level on Instagram. And I see people try to use it for that, but it's really all about LinkedIn, and LinkedIn's so underrated. And the organic reach on there is better than anything other than TikTok right now.
Somebody said that they're shocked that Reddit's on that list.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. Reddit should be on the list as well, especially if you're a developer on the B2B level, but also just for like research on the B2C level. Like see what the word on the street is.
So how do you? I mean, are there their best practices for going to each, I mean, because every platform is different. It's like I can do good stuff on LinkedIn because I'm like you. I understand that platform. I'm not on Facebook that much, even though if you look at, when we stream, typically Facebook is bringing the most people in, which just terrifies me on some levels. But I suck at Reddit. It's like I cannot do meaningful posts on Reddit.
Yeah, it's not my platform either. I get you.
So how do you, I mean, is it a situation where you need to just basically go out and find somebody who's a Reddit expert, or I mean, and I'm not picking on Reddit in particular, but how much do you have to vary your voice on each platform? Or is it something where you can use like a buffer or something to just blast out everything?
So ideal scenario is that everything is adjusted for each channel, and it's not the exact same content. Let's say you're putting something out on 5 different channels today. Ideally, it would look a little bit different on everything. Now, I would say that most people, even huge brands with huge marketing departments, aren't able to do a good job of that. That's because it's a lot of freaking work. And it's hard. So we tend to see scenarios, whether it's us or whether it's a brand doing it themselves, or just a person, focus on kind of 2 primary channels where you really know this is where my audience is, this is where I can drive results. And then everything else can be cross-posting. 1 to 2 primary channels, like find which ones are going to be the right fit for you, and understand how to create content there. And if you don't, learn it. That's a task you're going to have to master. And the more you get better at that on your own, the easier it will be to understand when you need help, or when you bring in someone to shoot content for you, to scale up, to really take the next step. But volume of content and consistency, at least on 1 or 2 platforms, is going to help pretty much any brand in the world succeed.
Let's hit up. Div's got a question here. Well, first let's pull up Nightwolf's comment. Nightwolf says about Reddit, for advertising, go to niche. Oh, look, I'm just right here. Hi. Go to niche out there anywhere as a professional, or go to the trenches where you could get trolled, but play it like a challenge, since the dark side of Reddit could either give you a cult or burn you down. I have so many downvotes on anything that I ever post. I just avoid it. So let's read the question from Div. What is the channel that needs to be one of these 2? Twitter, I assume.
Yeah, I think so. I'd answer the question differently though. So I would say, if for me, I'm B2B, right? So for me, it's going to be LinkedIn. And then second to that is probably Instagram, because it's visual. Actually, second to that would be YouTube, because I'm going to house my content on that, because we're like creative studio and agency. And I'm just giving an example of like me. Right now, if you're a developer, that actually could look potentially similar, because if you're trying to make connections with business people, with people who can help further your game, LinkedIn should definitely not be overlooked. If you have content that you can share, like rich video content, I would definitely like host that on YouTube, but you're not going to primarily engage. So Twitter could be your vehicle for that. So it could be your 2 top channels of LinkedIn and Twitter, and then you could host content on YouTube. We break these things down into a matrix.
I kind of feel like Twitter has done this big shift, right? Because it went from like fan stuff to now, if a game dev posts about their game, publishers look at it, other game devs, plus with all like the pitch a game hashtags and stuff, it's more like industry people seeing it, and maybe Twitch streamers, YouTubers use Twitter. But it's like, as far as tweeting about your game to fans on Twitter, I don't think it's as much fan facing as it used to be. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it depends on the goal. So are you thinking because we're talking B2B and B2C, you got to give me the direction, right? So which is it?
I was just saying, like, if a dev posts on Twitter to fans,
Yeah, I agree with you with that. I think the results are probably mixed. I mean, if it's just a quick update, like, hey, we're pushing a patch or something, like that's cool. Twitter is good for that, just kind of quick news. But I would use a Facebook or something else where you could have a bit more of a rich, post, a little more content there if you have something meaningful to say, and you can target people differently, because the targeting on Facebook is a lot better than Twitter.
It
I
may be better, but it's a much worse interface to try to figure out.
It's not easy.
I personally have changed how I use Facebook. Like, I don't go on there for family stuff and photos and stuff. I go on there and I look through it to see, like, if there's a site I want to visit, or of course, because Facebook has the amazing algorithm and knows every single thing that I want. So, I'll click, oh, this site, this looks cool. This motorcycle thing's cool, and this whatever. And then I hardly ever go on and look at people's feeds and like their stuff, and so
yeah, I'm a lurker. Like you,
I am too.
Describing.
I'll like, even on any platform, Twitter, I'll scan through stuff, scan, and then, maybe I should like something, 40 things later.
But that's, you bring up a good point though. So like, because where I am active though is LinkedIn, because that's my primary channel. So I think whichever your primary channel or channels are, where you're going to be active, where you feel like you can find people who can further your career or your business, you have to be more than just scanning and lurking in the shadows. So like on LinkedIn, if I post something, I literally try to respond to every single comment. And then I'm also going off of my channel and engaging with other people's content, whether they're friends of mine or not. And I'm actively adding new connections every week. And I'm putting out 3 to 5 posts per week. So it's a lot of work.
That's a lot of posts.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's what it takes.
Here we go.
But the organic reach on something like LinkedIn is huge. And I would say something like TikTok, you're going to have huge potential to grow very quickly as well.
And I don't really do anything on LinkedIn, and I have more people trying to connect with me on LinkedIn than any other platform. Exactly. Okay, Nightwolf, how do you post on LinkedIn when you are new and do not have anything really professional or in store? Would that devalue your LinkedIn or create a harsher judgment if you post in progress?
No, not at all. I mean, I think there's a number of things, number of angles you could take there. One, there's a lot of people who are just interested in building their network. They will accept your connection requests on LinkedIn, even if you don't have anything on your profile or any posts. And you should start that engagement where you're going and finding content you like, and you're following people, you're engaging with them, you're leaving comments, and you're asking questions. Like, that's a great thing to do on a platform like LinkedIn, is like ask questions about something within comments, or just broadly, to your audience. If you do have followers at a certain point, get a conversation going. You could put something out and say like, hey, this is a work in progress. I'd love some feedback on it. I'm early in my journey here, or we're thinking about doing this. And you can create a poll, and you can say like, should we go this direction? Should we go that? Are there any other developers out there, designers out there who've had this issue? People love those conversations on LinkedIn. What they don't actually is like political stuff and all the shit you see on Facebook.
We've actually had that discussion about imposter syndrome, where people are like, well, I don't know enough to post. You don't realize the stuff that that other people don't, even if you've just only been doing stuff for a little bit, right? People just starting out and have never done anything, they will like suck up that knowledge of, even if you've been doing it 6 months or a year or just started, it's like, this happened to me. I don't,
people love to teach and share, like, I mean, I learn stuff all the time, online, and like LinkedIn specifically, but I also like will answer a question if I know the answer, and you feel great about it, even if it's simple or stupid, or you heard the answer yesterday from someone else. Mm-hmm. Jay, you were talking about your Discord, right? When you first started that, you were like, I don't know what's going to happen. But then when you got it going, you're seeing other people answering other people's questions in there. Like, how cool was that moment, right?
That's really cool. So one thing to keep in mind, Div, on or Night Wolf, both of you, either one, on LinkedIn that you really have to be careful of. And I learned this a little later on because I'm one of those people that for years, if you sent me an invite, I just accepted it. I was like, yeah, I need to get a big old network going on and all this other stuff.
Right.
The quality of your network on LinkedIn matters dramatically because the way that their algorithm distributes your posts, it's going to go, basically to boil it down, it's going to go to a percentage of your total network. So you don't want people in your network that have absolutely nothing to do with the game industry. A lot of these people, and it's all kinds of different genres, from accountants to lawyers to real estate agents, and there's tons of people out who are trying to get this gigantic network, but you want to make sure that you really only follow people and connect with people that you have a direct, I'm not going to say direct relationship with, because I think those days of LinkedIn are gone, but that are in your particular sphere of influence or industry or whatever, because otherwise the stuff that you do post is getting wasted. It's not going, you're not going to get nearly the engagement out of it. So over the past year, I've not only culled a lot of the people that I was connected with on LinkedIn, but I'm also much more picky, when people send me a LinkedIn request.
Time to go through LinkedIn and take out Sally that works at some movie theater in
Tennessee.
Seriously.
No disrespect to Sally. I think she probably does a great job, with the popcorn and the tickets, but
we call her Sally from the alley. So
she's not our target audience, so you've got to be there. And the other thing, and we talk about this a lot, it's important, even if you're not posting on LinkedIn, it's important as a developer to have a personal page and also have one for your company, because
absolutely,
it gives you that legitimacy. That's the first thing. If I go and somebody sends me they want to do something together or whatever the invite is, and I look and it has that little gray building as the logo for the company, I'm like, you don't even have you've got to do something here. So make sure you've got that to start with.
Yeah, that's such a turnoff for anybody I see with that. That's a small thing you just brought up, but it's a huge thing.
It is.
It's a huge thing, and I see that, and I'm like, okay, either you haven't taken the time to this small amount of time to just figure that out, or you're not big enough to at least care about your brand, to have a logo, or you just are not going to respond to anything I send you because you don't care, because you didn't even go put in the right company name that might have a logo. Because sometimes I see that with big brands.
It is. And the other one that's the most basic one that I see developers not take seriously is use the URL from your website as your email address. Do not send me business emails from trevor@gmail.com. Because it's just it doesn't look professional.
Yeah, I can tell you, we have we do a lot of lead generation for our agency, and we filter out Gmail. So as soon as a Gmail lead comes in, it gets very low, deprioritized immediately.
So that's a very good point. And so let's talk about lead generation for a minute too, because especially when studios are working on contract work, or they need, they're pitching their art services and things like that, they need to have some form of basic lead generation pipeline. Can you, explain a little bit about what it is and then the tools that you all use and how that actually works?
Yeah, sure. So the tools that we use are primarily, what we're doing is we're sending traffic to our website. Our website is very much just a brochure style website. It's informational. It's got a little bit about what we do, some sample work, and it's meant to get you to send us an email. We never get phone calls. People just don't pick up the phone. They 99% people are going to fill out that lead form. And we also recently started using the Chatbot. So we have a Drift Chatbot. I recommend Drift. in particular. It's really easy to set up. It's really easy to use. You can program a bunch of stuff in, and it can do that filtering that I mentioned and some other really cool things. But essentially, we're sending people into that funnel. Now, how we get them there is where it gets interesting. So AdWords is our primary lead driver. That's where most of our leads come from. And there's a lot of work to really dial that in and curate the keywords and different landing pages in some cases and different geographies and, figuring out, which is costing more, which is costing less. And really, like, you can spend a ton of time just there. I mean, I can attribute building my business to AdWords because no one knew who we were. And I just got aggressive spending money on AdWords because I knew that would work. And I knew that's how we could do it. And I knew that a lot of other agencies weren't and still don't spend money advertising and promoting themselves. They work through like word of mouth, or they work through, someone leaving one agency and starting another and bringing a client with them and kind of hoping the rest will follow. And that's great, but you need cold leads as well. The second one we do is email marketing. That's very curated and targeted in terms of the company size and industries that we reach out to. And then the third is LinkedIn. That's like right up there,
So you're running ads on LinkedIn?
No, we're not running ads on LinkedIn, actually. We haven't tested that yet. They're also very high CPM, just for what it's worth. And for us, the key with LinkedIn is a lot of original content. So we post, like I said, 3 to 5 times a week, mostly on my page. Now, our company page, we've started to do a little bit, but company pages don't optimize or work the same way as personal pages on LinkedIn. You're never going to get a company page to do as well as a personal page. So I highly recommend picking someone within your organization to be the front person and use their page on behalf of your company and still have that company page. And you should still post or repost on the company page. But the way the algorithms work and the way everything is designed, the personal pages are going to get the most amount of attention. So we post mostly on mine. We repost and cross-post some certain things to the company page. We are reaching out to people we've used the Sales Navigator in LinkedIn for. We're reaching out to them every week and adding 20 to 50 new contacts. And then we are sending people into different categories. So if we think someone's a fit for the podcast that we do, they'll get a very curated message because that's a very short list. And that's really just about like scheduling someone for the podcast. But that can also become lead generation because that conversation can turn into us helping them or them helping us. And then the other category is just like pure connections, casual conversations that turn a bit salesy at a certain point. And that's the real like delicate part of LinkedIn, is finding the right moment to really get your pitch out, because you can't do it in the first message. You can't do it in the second message. Even sometimes you have to find the right moment to do it. So there's a lot of science behind it.
It's a lot of trial and error.
It took a while.
So Matthew's got a question from YouTube. It says, how much does it cost to hire a marketer like a Facebook page manager? So
Sure.
That could bleed into a bigger question as well. So what sort of roles or support do you need for these different channels? And what's that going to cost you?
Yeah. I mean, I would say it depends, what you're trying to do. So if you just want someone to kind of like be an overall social media manager and kind of oversee all of your accounts, and maybe some paid, but mostly just organic, kind of just get you going, I would definitely not necessarily look for an agency unless you've got funding. I would say you're at that point where you should find an independent social media manager, freelance person, who you can start with like 5, 10, 15 hours a week, whatever you guys can decide together is a good enough balance to get going, because you're going to want to just make sure the pages are properly built out. There are some things there to just kind of clean up usually. Figure out a schedule of content, figure out how that's going to happen, and figure out who you want to reach and how you're going to start targeting them. And then as things grow and as you start to get some traction, then you may need more resources, or you may need more hours from that person. Now, as at an agency level, like if you've got funding, we have separate people. So we have one person that their entire job is just managing Facebook ads, but that's because they're scaling, ads into the hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time, right? So like they can only focus on that. But then we also have people at our agency who their job is to do that one I just mentioned, where they oversee a brand's entire scope of social accounts, and the brand does some of their posts, we do some of them, and we kind of basically add bandwidth to their team. So it's going to depend where you're at. I mean, at some point you're going to grow, you're going to have some money, and you're not going to want to do that or worry about that, yourself. You're going to bring people on, but I would just start with more of a freelance resource and kind of grow from there. Be my recommendation. Cost-wise, I mean, I think you can find a good person for 25 to 35 an hour, potentially even less. I wouldn't focus so much on the hourly. It's more about someone who's good at what they do, and if they're quick, you can just figure out a monthly budget and say, like, this is what I can afford. This is what I need accomplished,
So the follow on is, is Fiverr a good place to find freelancers?
I think Upwork's better for something like that. But I haven't used Fiverr a lot, to be honest. I don't know if I have as much trial and error there.
So what's the difference? I mean, I've actually only used Fiverr in the past, like when we do data entry stuff and things like that. What's the difference between the two?
Maybe Fiverr's changed a lot since I've looked at it. I mean, when I had looked at it earlier on, it just seemed like it was more of a place to get a quick thing done. But now it seems like it's more the gig economy that you're seeing with Upwork and stuff now, where you can go hire someone like a social media manager. So yeah, I just haven't used it in that way. So I think Upwork's a great solution. Sounds like Fiverr fits that role too. I just haven't used it for that. But you're hiring like freelance people to do a consistent job on there, though, like someone to do like data entry or producer or developer. Like, you're finding anything and everything on there at the moment?
It's not. We don't have somebody like full time on Fiverr, but we found a couple of really good data entry folks on there, and that's who we go back and forth to whenever we need something. It's not like
nice
all the time thing, though.
But you found some reliable people.
Do this Nightwolf question here. Nightwolf, always with the good questions. Mr. Nightwolf, big question. Since I follow quite a bit of animators / voice actors, would YouTubers' business emails be a good way to contact / hire people?
So if you follow YouTubers and animators, you could start with their email that's listed on their YouTube. I've seen hit or miss results with that to get a hold of people. We do a lot of influencer marketing, and sometimes you get through to people. Sometimes they're not checking that stuff as well. So I would also, try to connect with them on other platforms that are a bit more responsive as well, like, a LinkedIn or an Instagram, where you can DM someone and hit them up on all fronts. Because I recently hit someone up from their YouTube Gmail that I wanted to collaborate with, and just no response, and I'm offering to pay them. So yeah, it's weird to me. Sometimes they're just there and they don't manage it very well. I don't know if I'm answering the question as was intended, but if I'm not, let me know, Nightwolf.
I had a question and it completely just evaded my brain. I'm not sure where it went. So, I mean, once you get these inbound people, visitors, potential customers, fans, whatever, what should you do? What's that call of action that you need to do to retain them? I mean, should you be looking to, drive them to a Discord or drive them to your Steam page or what's your goal when you start pulling those in?
Yeah, it's a great question, because to me, the other thing I wanted to talk about was community development. And I think that's super important. And I think that is one of the tools you can use all the time, but especially if you maybe don't have a game out yet, or you're still building your career, your network, or if you have something, like I think there was a note earlier, like, hey, if I have work in progress, what can I do? That's a environment in which the community will appreciate the fact that you're giving them that preview that no one else is getting. It's kind of like paying to be part of the secret club or whatever, right? But you don't have to pay, you just subscribe, So I think that's the sort of reward that you want to give people who subscribe and who follow your channels, is you want to give them original and, exclusive content for those channels. So telling them stories about what you're working on, showing them, what's coming out or what you're up to, or even challenges you're trying to solve. I think people will appreciate that. I think once you have something released, once you have a game out, that's where you want to use those channels to think about things like R&D that can actually be done through social now. You don't need to go hire a big research agency anymore. You can do that through social. We were talking about Reddit earlier. I mean, like, you're going to find out how you're doing, good or bad, with what the conversation is about you or your game on Reddit. And that's something that you can use to your advantage. That's a huge deal. So I would just say, think about these free channels as something that you can leverage. And one example I'll give is, and this is a big game that we were working with, and we still work with. They're big in Latin America, really not very big here in the US. One of the things that we did for them before we started using these massive budgets they had for paid advertising is we said, that's all great, but you guys need to establish your Discord, need to establish your social channels here. So they did the Discord. We helped them establish their social channels here a little bit better. But then the other thing we did is we found some journalists and players who enjoyed the game, and we worked collaboratively with them to develop a community site for tips and tricks on the game, US hosted site, because they had that stuff in their other markets, but they didn't have anything in the voice and tone and just time zone of the US, right? And it was so needed. And it's still just kind of this little thing, but it's growing every month. And we're working with the brand to be able to, give those journalists some exclusive content at times that they can put out. We're putting tips and tricks videos out, so if it's your game, you're probably one of the best people who can put tips and tricks out for it, right? That kind of content, is gold. Like, use your channels for stuff that's going to help your community, help your players, because that's going to reward them, more than any diamond code could or something like that,
So how much of that, I mean, it's a good point when you're talking about handing out tips and tricks and things like that. We've got a client that does similar work there.
Right. Yeah. You showed me that. Yeah.
How much of that should you keep for your own fans, and how much of that should you be using to like seed the field for new people? Like, how much should you make exclusive or like not? Yeah. I mean, it's like, how do you strike that balance between, okay, here's a perk that we're going to use for our existing fans and the people that are engaged with us, and then here's a perk that we're going to use for, to try to get more people interested and give them value.
Got it. Yeah, I mean that it's almost kind of like the question we had before, right? Of like, should there be different content for different channels? So I think your answer is the answer is yes. Like it should be a little different. Um, so like what you're putting out, if you're promoting something to someone new, you know, should that be a better deal than, you know, like let's say you're giving away, you know, codes or something, right? Should that be a better deal than, you know, is offered to your current players? I mean, in theory, no, but you probably already did that at some point to the current players. So I don't necessarily think you're pissing them off to get new people into the mix that they could play with, right? But I do think you have to think about what is the exclusive piece of content or type of content that they're going to appreciate even more. And that would be things like, hey, like listen to the community, you know, so we're saying this thing isn't working and they actually see the developer go fix it. Like that's huge, right? I see that all the time where it's like, this is a great promotion, but why don't they just listen to our freaking comments and change this other problem? You know, like those things are going to go miles further than like matching the same thing you're doing in an ad as you are in the community. And I would kind of put like the tips and that kind of stuff in a similar bucket, I guess.
So we got some more questions. I'm going to toss out one more of mine before we dive too far into them, though. You know, a lot of times that we think of branding as in, okay, this is your logo, this is your, you know, colors, and this is your font and all this other stuff. But what we're learning here is it's also your voice. So how do you appropriately deal with just the trolls and the toxicity out there while maintaining, you know, a good brand presence with your social media voice?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we've worked with some clients who've had a lot of that, a lot of the trolls and the toxicity, and it's hard to manage. You know, it's not an easy thing. But I think that you have to like the first thing is like try to actually sorry, it's like an all Bay Area alert thing for COVID that just came on my phone. Sorry. We're live. But you have to first try not to create a problem, right? So like start there, you know. But it's gonna happen. Like you're not gonna make everybody happy. If you're everything to everybody, you're nothing to no one, right? And that's important to always remember, that you're not going to be able to achieve what everyone is looking for. So I think you got to like stick to your choices, kind of like we we're talking about with the branding. Like know what you're trying to achieve, know what you're putting out there, and then once you do, you know, stay rooted in that. But especially in something like gaming, be open to that feedback of like, hey, this is great, but like we're trying to get from here to here, and it'd be great if we had this tool or this advantage or this thing, you know. Like what you want to see, whether you're the person who's making that comment in the community or whether you're someone who sees that comment, is you want to see the brand respond and say, thanks so much, we're going to put this like into our consideration queue, like we appreciate you, you know, for caring, you know. And like you want to ideally see something, you know, change, if it's a big enough thing that enough people have talked about, right? But what you don't want to see is things that go unresponded to, and we see that with brands across the board. Someone will have a nasty comment and just no response, just crickets. And that's the worst, because that shows that you just aren't taking the time, or you don't care, or you don't agree, or you don't agree to disagree. But don't do that. And if it's just vulgar, like nonsense, hide that stuff. Get them out of there.
All right, I know we got questions. Sorry, I've been glossing over them.
You want to let's just start at the bottom and work backwards. Nightwolf. I've seen some itch.io devs, artists, and animators have Patreons to show future works and patches. If going that route, how do you decide which can be shared and which should have a paywall? And is that even an approach that can work?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, charging for that kind of stuff, it'd have to be really good. I mean, it'd have to be something people really, really need. I don't know. I'm just kind of against charging for things in general, like that, ahead of like actually a release. But if that's your role, like if your role is like, hey, this is what I do, I'm gonna release, patches and fixes and things that like the developers don't have time to do. That's actually kind of cool, and you could have a career out of that. I would appreciate that, but I'd want to kind of feel like that was what that person did, and like maybe that's their branding and that's kind of how they present themselves, is like, I'm the guy who fixes stuff. I would pay for that if it was a little $10 thing that helped me get to the next part.
Nightwolf, you should reach out to Corey on the Discord, Corey Treese, because they have a Patreon page for their development stuff. And I remember at one point we asked him, was it a viable way to fund stuff? And he said basically no. But reach out to him because he may have some feedback on that as well. All right, Indy. Indy's muted.
No, I'm here. I'm just looking to see what's the next question. Yo. I think we got them all.
Do you agree with that though, Jay? Like, would you pay for something if it was like if it was something you needed, something that was going to help? I don't know. I'm just curious.
I support devs on Patreon because I like what they do. And this is when Corey and I were talking about it. He was one of the last times he was on the show. And I was like, I don't give a shit about your animation that you're sending me a preview of. I was like, I really don't care. I could care less. I want you to make the game. And I like what you all are doing. So I give you X amount of dollars a month. Patreon, I think it is hard. I think it can be done.
Yeah, but you're a minority group that's going to recognize something from that angle.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's why I think it's tough. I see a lot of Patreons that basically exist as extensions of completed Kickstarters. And I can see something there, but I do, unless we develop a way of distributing content where, a Patreon user is going to get 2 weeks or a week shot at new content before anybody else does, which I think frankly would be really cool. But I don't know if we could do that. I don't even know if that technology exists or if any of the platforms are set up like that. But I think it's tough unless you're doing like commission pieces and things like that to, subside on a Patreon. Now, that said, one of the best ongoing novel series I've ever read that I am thoroughly addicted to is called The Wandering Inn, from a author called Pirate ABA. The entire thing is free online. They have versions that come out. It's cool. A volume here or there. Like the first 3 volumes, I think, are available on Kindle for a couple of bucks, nothing major. But the entire thing is well funded by Patreon, and Patreon users in that case get access to new chapters and new content before everybody else. I just don't know that we can do that for the game.
That's cool though. Somebody's kind of hacked the systems together there to solve what they needed to solve. Like, that's awesome.
And hold on, I got to get the dog. But Dio's got a good point, because Dwarf Fortress.
See what the dog has to say.
Work.
Dog says, "Let me out." And the dog says, "Isn't it beer 30?" Sure. And then we have Jay's chair.
Jay's chair. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. It looks like it's smiling, right?
It looks like it's slowly turning. Oh, that was creepy.
What'd the dog say?
Dog said, "It's freaking cold out here. Let me in."
Maybe it's cold outside.
Yeah. She went to the groomer today, so she's a little less woolly than normal.
Is your dog always
It's
embarrassed after
it's
they go to
almost
the
Christmas,
groomer?
so
Oh
Merry
God, no,
Christmas,
she
Dad.
loves it. It's like a freaking spa day for her. I mean, she literally, we take her in and we open the little gate to for her to go back to the back because they have the kennels and everything back behind the grooming area, and she goes to the exact crate she wants every single time. And if there's another dog in there, she will like sit down in front of that crate or that kennel area and just like stare at that dog. And the people at the grooming will move the dog that's in her spot to somewhere else because that's just the way she is.
I do something similar to that when I'm at the bar. If someone's sitting where I want to sit, I just walk up right behind them and get really close.
Just stare at them.
And I just stand there like this. Just like not touching them, just stand there. And then eventually they will get up and move.
All right. So dog grooming and intimidating people in bars aside, if you've got any more questions for Trevor, we're going to be wrapping it up soon. So toss it in here. Zero Vapor had a good comment here. You know, Coffee Stain Studios is a great example of building a great community specifically for Satisfactory. Does this affect their branding? All right, so here's what I find interesting about this. When I think Coffee Stain Studios, I think Goat Simulator. I don't even think Satisfactory. And you're talking about two freaking wildly different games. I mean, absolutely night and day comparing the two. How does something like that affect your branding, Trevor? If you've got, if you're doing branding at the studio level and then you have two games that are just like not
so different.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you have. It depends. Like it's hard, right? Like, did you know that you were going to be creating a brand or a studio that was going to end up releasing totally different things? You may not have known that, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, they didn't, because they started out just as a developer, and then with the success they had on Goat Simulator, then they started publishing other games.
Got it. Yeah. So in that case, yeah, there's nothing there that you could have changed in terms of how it ended up. But all you can really do is think about like, what is the sort of like umbrella of the brand, and what does it mean? So maybe that is this moment where you got to kind of like refresh what it means. You don't necessarily have to like change the logo, but like, what if now like the brand's mission is just to deliver fun experiences or happiness, or like, I mean, at a high level, right? Then you got to like write down what that really means. But like, it can still look very different. It can have two totally different audiences, but it could still be that they're both to entertain people or make people happy, or give people an outlet for whatever their genre of choices. So like, I still feel like there's ways to tie things together. But this would be that moment where they should start doing that. They wouldn't want to like just keep releasing stuff and then end up with this Frankenstein like we sometimes see, right? Where all of a sudden it's like, ah, shit, who are you guys? Like, what do you represent? Are you just some holding company? I
mean, it's interesting because we see some publishers and they only want specific types of games. We are a strategy publisher. Paradox is one of those, and they're wildly successful with it. It's like, you don't get anymore. They have done some experiments in the past with like different genres, but it doesn't last very long. But a Paradox game is typically going to be a grand strategy RPG, something in that area. And then we have companies who basically publish what they want, what they enjoy playing. And there may be no rhyme or reason to it whatsoever. Is there a pro or a con to doing that?
I mean, I like the idea of the Paradox, approach, where you kind of have like something, at least you have like a genre that you're servicing, or at least multiple, right? Like, and I can speak to this from being a business owner, not of a gaming company as an agency, but still having that same problem of like, we recently had to be like, we can't work with everybody. Like, let's figure out who we really can service well, right? When you first start your company, you're like, we'll do anything for everybody. Just
we'll
help us
any
pay the bills. right? You need beer money, right, Jay? But then we recently we grew up a little, right? As I mentioned, there's that moment, and you go like, all right, takes just as much time to work with this level of client as this level of client. So you're like, all right, maybe we adjust the dials here a little bit, but you also go like, okay, for us it was gaming. All right, we've had some great traction with gaming, also with entertainment. Those two really complement each other, right? You know what doesn't complement each other? Doing B2B for some accounting firm in San Francisco. So you know what? That's not who we're going to do marketing for, and we're not going to learn that. We're going to stick with our kind of general lane. It's still pretty open, but it's specific enough that we're not trying to build a team that could do all three of those things, right? And so I feel like you would have the same conversation with yourself or with your team when you're making games. Like I've seen companies that do that really well with mobile games, where they're like, you know what, our mission is to deliver fun, quick mobile experiences that can be consumed easily in bite-sized moments, for a wide variety of people in a certain kind of age bracket, maybe, but the games themselves look wildly different. But that's okay. I know, that's what I'm getting from that brand, And so you're kind of like, yeah, let me see what they'll do out next. And I'll give it a try, because it's always something kind of funny or fun or weird,
Yeah, I mean, it is. And I think a lot of it, when we boil down to it, we can talk about, best practices. And that's what you've been awesome about for the last hour or so is giving us some guidance. But your brand is you. You have to make your own brand. I mean, you look at what the No Man's Sky team did. I mean, they did, I forget the name of the actual company, but they had this huge, space exploration game that got panned, but then they worked on it so hard. And now last week it won best ongoing game at the Game Awards, beating out things like Fortnite. But then they released this little platformer that it's there's no connection between these two. But, in some ways it's a good way for their team to take a break from, space exploration stuff. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. Like literally what you just said. You do have to be yourself at the end of the day and have a personality, right? Like a brand is no different. And when you're young and you're figuring it out, young as a brand, I mean, it's easy to get caught up in it, but at a certain point you do have to simplify it too and be like, you know what, we got to make some decisions, we got to pick some lanes. They might change later. That's okay, right?
Adapt. You have to adapt.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Be willing to adapt, but don't lose your core of what you started out to do. Whether that was the experience you wanted to bring people, or whether it was the type or genre, whatever it is. There's got to be something core there that doesn't change, and that's us as human beings, right?
Exactly. So Trevor, thanks so much for coming by, man. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, this is a great talk. I like talking about branding and hearing things.
Yeah, anytime, man.
Like we said, Dan, I mean, it's not like we ever schedule guests on here that we want to pepper with questions that we want to know the answers to, right? I mean, it's never. So Dan and I are going to go away for a little bit. We're going to enjoy Christmas and holidays and New Year's, but we're not leaving you stranded. The podcast versions of our sessions from last week are going to continue rolling out while we're on break. And then we will be back in early January, some point. I have to look. Let me see here. So, yep.
You might have to do the raid thing, Mr. J.
The what thing? Oh,
the raid.
Yeah, we're gonna raid. Here on Twitch, we're gonna raid the IGDA because they're doing a.
Oh wait, no, it's ready. We're ready to raid. So,
okay, good.
Make sure to join the Discord, everybody. Discord.gg/indiegame.business. And if you want to get on the social medias, just Google Indie Game Business and you'll find all the things, right? Thanks so much, Trevor. And
thank you.
Let's see here. I got to do this and then this.
We'll see y'all in 2020, everybody.
2021. 2020. I don't want to let 2020 over again.
So Groundhog Day. Don't do that. Don't do that, man. Scary. Freaking me out.